what the universe reveals when you finally let go. Carl Jung, there exists within each of us a master builder, an architect of the self that begins its work from the moment we draw our first breath and recognize ourselves as separate from the warm darkness of the womb. This builder, what Jung called the ego, sets to work immediately, gathering materials from the world around us: praise and blame, success and failure, the faces that smile at us and those that turn away. Brick by brick, it constructs what we come to believe is our identity, our fortress against the vast, unknowable mystery that surrounds us on all sides. In the early years, this construction feels natural, even necessary. The child learns to say, "I am," and fills in the blank with whatever seems to bring safety, love, or recognition. I am smart. I am good. I am strong. I am the one who makes others laugh. Each declaration becomes another stone in the wall, another rampart against the terror of dissolution, of being nothing in a universe that seems to care little for our individual existence. As we grow, the fortress becomes more elaborate. We add towers of achievement, bridges of relationship, moats of protective behavior. We learn to present ourselves in ways that garner approval, to hide aspects that might invite rejection. The persona, that carefully crafted mask we show the world, becomes so familiar that we forget it is a mask at all. We mistake the costume for the actor, the role for the essence of who we are. The ego whispers constantly in our ear, its voice so persistent that we rarely question its authority. It tells us we must be someone, anyone, rather than risk being no one at all. It promises that if we just achieve enough, accumulate enough, control enough, we will finally be safe from the fundamental uncertainty that is the human condition. It offers us the illusion of separation, that we are independent agents in a mechanical universe, masters of our own destiny, architects of our own meaning. But there is a deeper truth that the ego cannot acknowledge, for to do so would threaten its very existence. We are not separate from the cosmos. We are expressions of it, waves on an infinite ocean, brief flickerings of consciousness in the eternal fire of being. The walls we build to protect ourselves from this vast mystery simultaneously cut us off from the very source of our life, our creativity, our deepest joy. The fortress of the ego is both prison and palace, both sanctuary and tomb. Within its walls, we feel safe but constrained, protected but isolated. We become like the mythical figures who sought immortality only, to discover that eternal life without growth, without change, without death and rebirth is a living death indeed. We achieve a kind of security, but at the cost of our souls. The ego's greatest fear is not physical death, but psychological dissolution, the loss of the coherent story it has spent a lifetime constructing. It will sacrifice almost anything to maintain its narrative integrity, spontaneity for predictability, growth for security, love for control. It would rather be right than be real, rather be consistent than be alive. And so we find ourselves bound to what Jung called the wheel of endless becoming, forever trying to become someone better, someone more complete, someone worthy of love and recognition. We chase achievements like a dog chases its own tail, never quite catching what we seek, because what we seek is not outside us, but has been within us all along, hidden beneath the elaborate construction of our supposed separate self. The ego's grip is seductive because it offers us the illusion of agency in a universe that often seems chaotic and uncontrollable. It tells us we can shape our destiny through force of will, that we can make ourselves invulnerable through careful planning and strategic living. It promises that if we just try hard enough, think clearly enough, work diligently enough, we can solve the fundamental puzzle of existence and arrive at some final state of completion and security. But the universe has other plans. Life has a way of humbling our carefully constructed towers of revealing the fragility of our most cherished certainties. The very cosmos that gave birth to consciousness seems to delight in dismantling our pretensions to permanence, our fantasies of control. What the ego experiences as crisis, the deeper self recognizes as invitation, an invitation to let go of what was never truly ours to begin with. The grip of the ego is not evil, it is simply limited. Like a child who clings to a security blanket, the ego serves a necessary function in the early stages of psychological development. It gives us the structure we need to navigate the world, the sense of agency required to make choices and take action. But what serves us in childhood can constrain us in maturity. The very mechanisms that once protected us can become the barriers that prevent us from touching the deeper mystery of our being. To recognize the ego's grip is not to condemn it, but to see it clearly for what it is, a provisional construction, a necessary but temporary dwelling place for consciousness as it journeys toward greater self-understanding. The fortress we have built is not our true home, but merely the hotel where we have been staying, growing ever more comfortable in its familiar rooms, while forgetting that vast landscapes of possibility stretch beyond its walls. The invitation that life extends to each of us is both simple and terrifying, to step beyond the known territory of our constructed identity and discover who we are when we are not being anyone in particular. This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, not the strengthening of the ego, but its transformation, not the building of higher walls, but the courage to walk beyond them into the mystery that has been calling to us all along. There is a sacred violence in the way life initiates us into deeper truth, not the violence of cruelty or malice, but the necessary breaking that cracks open the shell of our illusions and reveals the tender life within. This violence arrives wearing the mask of loss, of betrayal, of dreams that dissolve like morning, mist before the harsh light of reality. We call these experiences painful, devastating, traumatic, and they are, but they are also something else, something the ego cannot comprehend in its desperate clinging to the known. They are sacred wounds, portals through which the deeper self enters our carefully constructed world. The first cut is always the deepest, not because it inflicts the most damage, but because it introduces us to a truth we had managed to avoid. That nothing in this world of forms is permanent, that everything we love carries within it the seed of its own ending. Perhaps it is the moment when we realize our parents are not gods, but fragile human beings, struggling with their own fears and limitations. Perhaps it is the first time someone we trust betrays that trust, revealing that even love cannot guarantee security. Or perhaps it is the death of a dream we had carried since childhood, the recognition that the future we had imagined will never come to pass. These sacred wounds do not arrive by accident. They are not random acts of cosmic cruelty, but precise instruments of awakening, appearing exactly when our attachment to the illusion of permanence has grown strong enough to require such dramatic intervention. Life, in its infinite wisdom, knows that we will not willingly release our grip on what we believe gives our existence meaning. We must be shown, through the direct experience of loss, that our deepest security lies not in what we can hold, but in what we are willing to let go. In the mythology of the soul, every attachment is a teacher in disguise. The person we cannot live without, the achievement that defines our worth, the identity that we cling to like a life raft in stormy seas, each carries within it the seeds of its own dissolution. This is not because the universe is cruel, but because consciousness requires the constant movement between attachment and release, between the known and the unknown, between the ego's desire for permanence and the self's recognition of the eternal flux that is existence itself. The sacred wound teaches us that love and loss are not opposites but dance partners, moving together in the eternal rhythm of becoming and unbecoming. Every hello carries within it the whisper of goodbye. Every beginning knows its ending before the first word is spoken. This is not a cause for despair, but for a deeper kind of love. A love that can embrace the temporary nature of all forms while touching the eternal essence that moves through them. When we love someone or something, we imagine we are loving the form, the particular configuration of flesh and bone, the specific combination of thoughts and feelings, the unique arrangement of circumstances that we have come to associate with our happiness. But the sacred wound reveals that what we truly love is not the form, but the life force that animates it, not the particular expression, but the eternal spirit that dances through all expressions. The attachment itself becomes a kind of prayer, a way of saying to the universe, this matters to me, this has meaning, this is sacred. And the subsequent loss becomes the universe's response. Yes, it is sacred. So sacred that it cannot be contained in any single form, so precious that it must be released to return to the infinite source from which it came. We resist this teaching with every fiber of our being. The ego wages war against the very idea that our attachments are temporary, that our love objects are on loan from the cosmos rather than possessions we can claim forever. We bargain with life, promising to be better, to try harder, to deserve the permanence we seek. We rage against the dying of the light, as if our fury could somehow halt the natural process of dissolution and renewal. But the sacred wound continues its patient work, carving away at the false foundations of our security until we are left standing on the bedrock of what cannot be taken away. Layer by layer, attachment by attachment, it strips us of our illusions until we discover that beneath all our grasping lies an unshakable presence, a core of being that needs nothing external to validate its existence. This is the paradox that the wounded heart eventually learns, that what we grasp most tightly often becomes the very thing that prevents us from experiencing the deeper love, the unconditional acceptance, the fundamental okayness that is our birthright. The sacred wound is not punishment, but liberation, not evidence of cosmic indifference, but proof of cosmic love, a love so vast that it will not allow us to settle for the small securities that the ego mistakes for happiness. Through the sacred wound, we begin to understand that attachment and detachment are not opposites but complementary aspects of mature love. We learn to hold lightly what we love deeply, to cherish fully while releasing completely, to find in the very impermanence of forms the eternal presence that gives them meaning. The wound becomes a doorway, the loss becomes a finding, the ending becomes a beginning we could never have imagined from within the safety of our former certainties. And then comes the resistance, fierce, primal, absolute. When the sacred wounds have done their initial work and the comfortable structures of our identity begin to crumble, we do not go gently into that dark night of transformation. We fight, we thrash, we call upon every strategy the ego has ever devised to maintain its grip on the familiar world that is dissolving around us like salt in rain. This is the Nigredo that the ancient alchemists spoke of, the blackening, the putrefaction, the phase where all our golden certainties turn to lead and ash. What we once believed to be solid ground reveals itself as quicksand, and every step we take to find firmer footing only pulls us deeper into the primordial chaos that lies beneath all our carefully constructed meanings. The universe, it seems, has declared war on everything we thought we knew about ourselves and our place in the cosmic order. The resistance begins subtly, almost reasonably. We tell ourselves that this dark passage is temporary, a brief detour from our normal path that we can navigate through sheer force of will. We make bargains with reality, promising to be better, more grateful, more deserving of the stability we once took for granted. We seek out experts and advisors, therapists and teachers, anyone who might provide us with a map through this unmapped territory, a strategy for restoring the order that has been so ruthlessly disrupted. But the darkness has its own intelligence, its own purpose that cannot be negotiated with or reasoned away. It strips us of our familiar roles and identities with the methodical thoroughness of a surgeon removing diseased tissue. The successful professional finds themselves questioning the very foundations of their ambition. The devoted parent discovers aspects of themselves that seem to contradict everything they believed about their capacity for love. The spiritual seeker encounters shadows within their own psyche that make a mockery of their aspirations to enlightenment. We rage against this dissolution with the desperation of drowning swimmers who have not yet learned that struggling against the current only hastens their exhaustion. The ego, sensing its mortality, becomes more cunning, more desperate in its strategies of self-preservation. It may seek refuge in addiction, to substances, to activities, to relationships that promise temporary relief from the unbearable intensity of not knowing who we are anymore. It may construct elaborate spiritual or psychological systems designed to contain and control the chaos, turning even the process of transformation into another form of ego-aggrandizement. Or it may simply freeze like a deer caught in headlights, paralyzed by the magnitude of what is being asked of it. This paralysis can last for months, years, even decades. A kind of living death where we go through the motions of existence while something essential within us remains locked in the grip of terror, unable to move forward into the unknown or backward into the safety that no longer exists. The shadow realm that we find ourselves in during this phase is populated by all the aspects of ourselves that we have spent a lifetime denying, repressing, or projecting onto others. Here dwell our unlived lives, our unexpressed emotions, our unacknowledged desires and fears. Here, too, live the ancestral patterns we have inherited, the wounds and wisdom of generations past that have been encoded in our very DNA, waiting for the right moment to surface and demand our attention. In this darkness, we encounter what Jung called the shadow, not as an external enemy, but as an estranged part of ourselves, as essential to our wholeness, as light is to the recognition of form. The shadow speaks to us in voices we would rather not hear, shows us truths we would rather not see, demands acknowledgement of aspects of our humanity that we have spent lifetimes trying to transcend or escape. The psyche fights against this integration with everything it has. It would rather remain divided, keeping the light separate from the dark, the acceptable separate from the unacceptable, than face the terrifying possibility that wholeness might require us to embrace aspects of ourselves that contradict our most cherished self-images. The good person must acknowledge their capacity for cruelty. The spiritual seeker must face their worldly ambitions. The rational mind must accept the reality of forces beyond its comprehension or control. This resistance is not a failure of character or a sign of spiritual weakness. It is a natural and necessary phase of the transformation process, as essential as the darkness that precedes dawn. The ego's desperate clinging to its familiar territory serves a purpose. It ensures that we do not dissolve too quickly, do not lose ourselves entirely in the chaos of becoming. The resistance provides a kind of container for the dissolution, allowing it to proceed at a pace that consciousness can ultimately survive and integrate. But there comes a moment in every dark night when the futility of resistance becomes apparent, when the energy required to maintain our defenses exceeds our capacity to sustain them. The drowning swimmer discovers that struggling against the current only hastens exhaustion, that the path to the surface lies not in fighting the water, but in learning to move with its deeper rhythms, to trust its intelligence even when its intentions are unclear. It is here, in the exhaustion that follows our futile battle against the inevitable, that we encounter one of the most profound archetypes of transformation, the hermit. Not the hermit of popular imagination, the misanthrope who flees the world in bitterness or fear, but the archetypal hermit who turns inward not in rejection of life, but in recognition that the answers we seek cannot be found in the external realm of forms and phenomena. This is the hermit of wisdom traditions, the one who understands that the cave we must enter is not carved from stone, but from the substance of our own consciousness. The descent begins when the noise of the world, its demands, its distractions, its endless parade of temporary pleasures and urgent concerns finally becomes too much to bear. We find ourselves craving silence, not as escape, but as sanctuary, seeking solitude not as withdrawal, but as a return to the source. The extroverted energy that once powered our engagement with the world turns inward, like a river changing course, flowing toward depths we had not known existed within us. This inward turning is often misunderstood by those around us, and sometimes by ourselves. It can appear as depression, as antisocial behavior, as a troubling departure from our normal patterns of engagement. Friends and family may express concern, offer advice, suggest activities or treatments designed to restore us to our former selves. But the archetypal hermit knows that this descent is not a deviation from the path, but the path itself, not a departure from life, but a journey to its very center. In the cave of our deepest solitude, we begin the most important work of our lives, learning to distinguish between who we thought we were and who we actually are. This is not an intellectual exercise, but a lived exploration, a kind of spiritual archaeology, where we carefully excavate the layers of conditioning, expectation, and assumption that have accumulated over years of unconscious living. Each layer we remove reveals something more essential, more authentic, closer to the bedrock of our being. The lantern that guides us in this darkness is consciousness itself, not the narrow beam of rational thought, but the soft, steady light of aware presence that can illuminate without judging, reveal without condemning. This consciousness shows us things we have never seen before, the fears that have been secretly directing our choices, the desires we have been afraid to acknowledge, the gifts we have been too humble or too frightened to claim. In this inner landscape, we discover vast territories of ourselves that have remained unexplored. There are chambers of creativity that have been sealed shut by years of practical concerns, rooms of intuitive wisdom that have been dismissed by our rational minds, galleries of emotional truth that we have been too busy to visit. The hermit's journey is one of reclamation, of taking back the kingdom of our own consciousness from the various usurpers who have claimed dominion over it. We meet aspects of ourselves that we had relegated to the realm of dreams and fantasies, the artist, the mystic, the wild one, the sage. We encounter parts of our psyche that have been waiting patiently in the darkness for recognition and integration. Some of these aspects may initially appear threatening or unfamiliar, like meeting relatives we have never known existed. But gradually, we begin to recognize them as facets of our own wholeness, fragments of our authentic self that had been scattered by the pressures of conformity and the demands of survival. The hermit's cave is also a place where we meet the ancestors, not only our blood relatives, but the archetypal figures who have walked this path of transformation before us. Here we encounter the wisdom keepers, the mythic heroes and heroines who faced similar passages from the known to the unknown. Their stories become our stories, their struggles become our struggles, their victories become possible for us as well. In the deepest chambers of this inner cave, we discover something that changes everything, a presence that has been with us all along, watching and waiting with infinite patience for us to turn our attention inward long enough to notice it. This presence is neither young nor old, neither male nor female, neither personal nor impersonal. It simply is, the eternal witness, the unchanging awareness within which all our changing experiences arise and pass away. This encounter with our essential nature is both the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing that can happen to a human being. ordinary because this presence is not foreign or exotic, but the very ground of our being, as familiar as our own breath once we learn to recognize it. Extraordinary because discovering what has been here all along changes our relationship to everything else, to our fears, our desires, our relationships, our sense of purpose and meaning. The hermit's descent is not a permanent withdrawal from the world, but a temporary retreat that prepares us for a different kind of engagement. We go into the cave as fragments of ourselves and emerge as something approaching wholeness. We enter as seekers and emerge as finders. We descend as questions and ascend as living answers to mysteries we did not even know we were carrying. When we emerge from the hermit's cave, blinking in the light of ordinary consciousness, something fundamental has shifted in our perception. The world appears unchanged. The same streets, the same faces, the same endless parade of events and encounters. Yet everything is different because we are different. The eyes that see are no longer clouded by the desperate need to impose meaning through force of will. Instead, they have learned to recognize the meaning that is already there, woven into the very fabric of existence, like golden threads in a tapestry we had been too distracted to notice. This is when we begin to perceive what Jung called synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to mock the rational mind's insistence on linear causation while speaking directly to the soul's deeper knowing. The book that falls open to exactly the page we need to read. The stranger whose casual comment contains the precise insight that unlocks a puzzle we have been wrestling with for months. The dream that offers guidance for a decision we didn't even realize we were facing. At first, we may dismiss these occurrences as mere coincidence, statistical inevitabilities in a universe of infinite possibilities. The rational mind, reasserting itself after our descent into the unconscious depths, offers reasonable explanations: confirmation bias, selective attention, the human tendency to find patterns even in random data. But something deeper in us recognizes these events as communications from a level of reality that operates according to laws more subtle than those acknowledged by our mechanistic worldview. The universe, it turns out, has been speaking to us all along. Its language is not the linear logic of cause and effect that governs the realm of the ego, but the symbolic, associative language of the unconscious, the same language that dreams use to communicate truths too large for rational concepts to contain. This cosmic conversation happens not through words, but through the meaningful arrangement of events, the precise timing of encounters, the way certain symbols or themes repeat themselves across seemingly unrelated areas of our lives. Learning. To read this language requires a fundamental shift in how we orient ourselves to reality. We must learn to listen with more than our ears, to see with more than our eyes, to think with more than our rational minds. We must develop what the mystics have always called the eye of the heart, that organ of perception that can recognize the sacred significance of ordinary events, the way the infinite expresses itself through the finite, the eternal through the temporal. This shift in perception often begins with dreams. In the hermit's cave, we have learned to pay attention to the nocturnal theater of the unconscious, to treat our dreams not as random neural firing but as communications from deeper levels of our being. Now, in our renewed engagement with the waking world, we begin to notice that the same symbolic language that operates in dreams is also active in the events of our daily lives. The dream image of a bridge appears, and later that week we find ourselves faced with a crucial decision about whether to take a new job that would require us to literally cross a bridge every day. The dream of a locked door is followed by a series of situations where we must choose between forcing our way forward and waiting for the right moment of opening. The appearance of certain animals, numbers, or natural phenomena begins to take on personal significance. The hawk that circles overhead just as we are contemplating a major life change. The repeated appearance of the number sequence that first caught our attention on the day we met our future spouse. The sudden appearance of butterflies during a period of profound personal transformation. These are not superstitious attributions of meaning to meaningless events, but recognition of the way consciousness and cosmos mirror each other, the way our inner state of being calls forth corresponding outer experiences. Synchronicity teaches us that we are not isolated beings struggling to impose our will on an indifferent universe, but participants in a vast web of interconnection where everything is in constant communication with everything else. Our thoughts, emotions, and intentions are not confined to the boundaries of our individual consciousness, but ripple outward into the field of collective being, influencing and being influenced by forces we are only beginning to understand. This recognition fundamentally alters our relationship to control and planning. We learn to hold our intentions lightly, to make our plans while remaining open to the unexpected opportunities and course corrections that the universe offers. We develop what might be called purposeful serendipity, the ability to move toward our goals while remaining alert to the signs and synchronicities that might reveal a more elegant path than the one our rational minds have devised. The practice of recognizing synchronicity becomes a form of prayer, a way of staying in conversation with the deeper intelligence that orchestrates the cosmic dance. We learn to ask questions not only of other people and books and experts, but of life itself, and to listen for the answers that come through the seemingly random events and encounters of our daily experience. In this state of heightened receptivity, we begin to experience what the ancient traditions called beginner's mind, a quality of fresh openness that can perceive the miraculous in the mundane, the sacred in the ordinary. Every day becomes an adventure in meaning-making, every encounter a potential messenger, every coincidence a possible invitation to deeper understanding or more authentic action. It is here, in this new relationship with the meaningful mystery of existence, that we encounter one of the most profound paradoxes of human transformation. That true surrender is not passive but active, not a giving up, but a giving in. Not the collapse of will, but its refinement into something far more powerful and precise. The alchemy of surrender begins when we finally understand that the force we have been fighting against is not our enemy, but our deepest ally, not a threat to our authentic nature, but the very process by which that nature is revealed. The ancient alchemists spoke of the transformation of base metals into gold, and they were not speaking merely of chemical processes, but of the mysterious work by which consciousness transforms itself from the leaden density of ego identification into the golden transparency of awakened awareness. This is the great work, the opus contra naturam, the work against nature that is actually a collaboration with nature's deepest intention for our becoming. Surrender, we discover, is not a single moment of capitulation, but an ongoing alchemical process that unfolds in stages, each requiring its own particular kind of courage and understanding. In the first stage, which the alchemists called Nigredo, we learn to stop fighting the dissolution of our familiar world. In the second stage, albedo, we began to perceive the subtle interconnections that weave reality together. Now, in what they called rubedo, we learn to actively participate in our own transformation, to consciously cooperate with the forces that are reshaping us from within. This cooperation is perhaps the most difficult thing the human psyche is ever asked to do. Every instinct of survival, every program of self-preservation, every strategy we have ever developed for maintaining control rebels against the idea of consciously choosing our own dissolution. Yet this is precisely what true surrender requires, not the passive acceptance of defeat, but the active choice to die to who we have been in order to be born into who we are becoming. The chrysalis offers us the perfect metaphor for this mysterious process. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly through effort or will or striving. It does not attend workshops on wing development or read books about the principles of flight. Instead, it surrenders so completely to the process of transformation that its very cellular structure dissolves into what biologists call imaginal soup, a state of creative chaos from which an entirely new form of life emerges. Yet this surrender is not passive. Deep within the dissolving tissues of the caterpillar, certain cells called imaginal cells begin to activate, carrying within them the blueprint for the butterfly that is to come. These cells know something the caterpillar consciousness could never comprehend, that the dissolution is not an ending but a beginning, not death, but metamorphosis, not the loss of life, but its transformation into a more expanded and beautiful expression. In our own process of transformation, we too must learn to trust the imaginal cells of our becoming, those deep impulses toward authenticity, creativity, and connection that persist even when everything else seems to be falling apart. These impulses may seem impractical, unrealistic, or even dangerous to the rational mind that still clings to the familiar patterns of the caterpillar existence. But they carry within them the wisdom of our essential nature, the blueprint for who we are meant to become. The alchemy of surrender teaches us that there is a vast difference between the ego's surrender and the self's surrender. When the ego surrenders, it does so from a place of defeat, exhaustion, or despair. I give up. I can't do this anymore. But when the self surrenders, it does so from a place of recognition and trust. I see now that there is a deeper intelligence at work here, and I choose to align myself with its unfolding. This shift from ego surrender to self-surrender is marked by a fundamental change in our relationship to uncertainty. Where once we experience the unknown as threat, we begin to experience it as invitation. Where once we saw change as loss, we begin to see it as opportunity. Where once we interpreted challenge as punishment, we begin to recognize it as the universe's way of calling forth capabilities we didn't know we possessed. The deeper intelligence that orchestrates this cosmic symphony is not separate from us, but works through us, expressing itself as our deepest intuitions, our most authentic impulses, our clearest moments of knowing. Learning to surrender to this intelligence is learning to trust our own deepest wisdom, to follow the guidance that emerges not from the calculating mind, but from the integrated being that is beginning to emerge from the chrysalis of our former identity. This trust is not blind faith, but informed confidence, based on direct experience of how the process works. We begin to notice that when we align ourselves with the deeper currents of our becoming, doors open that we could never have forced. Resources appear that we could never have manufactured. Connections form that we could never have orchestrated through networking or strategy alone. The alchemy of surrender ultimately reveals that what we thought was our individual will was actually a kind of interference pattern, like static, that prevents us from hearing the deeper music that wants to play through us. When we learn to quiet this static, not by suppressing our will, but by aligning it with the cosmic will of which it is a part, we discover that we are not losing our power, but gaining access to a power far greater than anything we could generate, through effort alone. In this phase of the great work, we begin to understand that we are both the alchemist and the prima materia, both the consciousness that observes the transformation and the substance that is being transformed. We are participating in our own becoming with a level of conscious cooperation that few human beings ever achieve, learning to midwife our own rebirth with the skill and dedication of a master craftsperson working on their finest creation. There comes a moment in every deep transformation when all the familiar landmarks disappear, when the old identity has dissolved, but the new one has not yet crystallized, when we find ourselves suspended in what mystics throughout the ages have called the Great Void. This is not the dramatic darkness of crisis or the productive solitude of the hermit's cave, but something far more subtle and far more profound. The fertile emptiness that exists in the space between becoming and being, the pregnant silence that holds all possibilities within its invisible embrace. The ego experiences this void as the ultimate terror, the final confirmation of its deepest fear that underneath all our busy becoming lies nothing. No self, no story, no solid ground on which to stand. The ego cannot comprehend emptiness as anything but absence, cannot conceive of silence as anything but the failure of sound. It experiences the void as threat, as loss, as the negation of everything it has worked so hard to construct and maintain. But the soul, that deeper aspect of our being that has been quietly orchestrating this entire process of transformation, knows the void as the ultimate teacher, the final guru, the one who can show us what we truly are when we are not busy being anyone in particular. The soul recognizes emptiness not as the absence of something, but as the presence of everything in potential, not as silence, but as the pause between breaths that makes breathing possible. In the void, all our carefully constructed definitions of ourselves fall away like costumes that no longer fit. We are not the successful professional, the devoted parent, the spiritual seeker, the wounded healer, the creative artist. We are not any of the roles we have played or the stories we have told about ourselves. We are not even the one who has been transforming, for transformation itself requires a something that changes from one state to another. And in the void, there is no thing to change. This dissolution of definition is perhaps the most disorienting experience human consciousness can undergo. We have spent our entire lives learning to say, "I am," and filling in the blank with various identities, qualities, and characteristics. Now, in the vast spaciousness of the void, we discover that we are most truly ourselves when we cannot complete that sentence, when the I am stands alone, naked and undefined, pointing not to any particular thing, but to the very source from which all things arise. The void teaches us that what we have been calling emptiness is actually fullness beyond our capacity to measure or comprehend. It is the same emptiness that physicists speak of when they describe the quantum vacuum, not truly empty, but seething with potential energy, constantly birthing particles and possibilities from what appears to be nothing. It is the emptiness of the pregnant womb, the silence of the composer's pause, the blank canvas that calls forth the artist's vision. In this space of no definition, we begin to understand that all our seeking, all our striving, all our efforts to become someone, or something more than we already are, have been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. We have been trying to fill what we thought was an emptiness within us, not realizing that this emptiness is not a lack, but the very ground of our being, the fertile void from which all our experiences arise and to which they return. The void reveals that consciousness itself is not a thing, but a space, not a possession we have, but a dimension we inhabit, not a product of the brain, but the field within which all experience occurs. When we stop trying to locate ourselves as objects within consciousness and recognize ourselves as consciousness itself, the terror of emptiness transforms into the joy of infinite possibility. This recognition often comes in waves like tides, of understanding that wash over us and then recede, leaving us sometimes clear and sometimes confused, sometimes filled with wonder and sometimes with a strange kind of grief. We are grieving the loss of our familiar boundaries, our comfortable limitations, our cozy prison of definition. We are mourning the death of the one who thought they needed to become enlightened, successful, loved, or complete. But in the depths of this grief, we discover something extraordinary. We cannot actually locate the one who is grieving. When we look for the griever, we find only the grief itself, and when we look for the one who is aware of the grief, we find only awareness itself, vast, spacious, unborn, and undying. We are not the contents of consciousness, but consciousness itself. Not the waves, but the ocean. Not the experiences, but the experiencing. The void teaches us that this recognition is not an achievement, but a remembering. Not a becoming, but a being. Not a destination, but the very ground from which all journeys arise. We have never been separate from what we were seeking. We have never been incomplete. We have never been anything other than the infinite awareness that dreams itself into existence as a finite form, plays at being lost so it can experience the joy of being found, creates boundaries so it can experience the bliss of their dissolution. Inyo, the void. We learn that true freedom is not the freedom to become anything we want, but the freedom from the compulsion to become anything at all. We discover that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the space within which all conflicts arise and resolve themselves. We find that love is not an emotion we feel, but the very fabric of reality itself, the fundamental force that weaves all apparent opposites into one seamless whole. The void, it turns out, is not empty but full, not silent but singing, not absent but present in ways that make all other forms of presence seem pale and partial by comparison. It is the teacher that teaches by not teaching, the guru that guides by pointing beyond all guidance, the presence that reveals itself precisely by being present as no thing at all. As we emerge from the profound teaching of the void, we find ourselves witnessing one of the most beautiful and bittersweet aspects of the transformation process, the persona's final dance. These masks we have worn for so long, the professional self, the social self, the family self, the spiritual self, begin to slip away, not with the violence of sudden revelation, but with the gentle grace of autumn leaves releasing their hold on the branch when their season of service has come to an end. This is not the dramatic death that the ego feared, but something far more tender. A gradual recognition that the roles we have played with such dedication, the identities we have defended with such fervor, were never who we truly were, but simply costumes in the grand theatre of existence. We watch with a mixture of gratitude and gentle sorrow as these familiar aspects of ourselves transform from essential truths into beautiful but temporary expressions of the eternal consciousness that we are discovering ourselves to be. The persona, Jung reminds us, is not inherently false or deceptive. It is the interface between our inner world and the outer world, the necessary adaptation that allows consciousness to function within the constraints and opportunities of human society. Like an actor's costume, it serves a vital function in the drama of existence, allowing us to play our parts with skill and authenticity while never forgetting that we are something more than any single role could contain. But now, having touched the vast spaciousness of the void, having glimpsed our true nature as pure awareness, we can no longer take these personas quite so seriously. They continue to function. We still fulfill our professional responsibilities, maintain our relationships, engage with the world in all the familiar ways, but there is a quality of lightness, of playfulness, that was not there before. We are beginning to wear our identities like clothes rather than confusing them with our skin. This recognition often begins with humor, the sudden ability to laugh at the elaborate performances we have been giving, the intricate defenses we have constructed, the serious importance we have attributed to maintaining our image in the eyes of others. We see ourselves as if from a great height, with the compassionate amusement of a parent watching a child dress up in grown-up clothes, playing house with tremendous earnestness and complete innocence of the game they are engaged in. The businessman realizes that his carefully cultivated persona of competence and control is just that, a persona, and that underneath the suit and the strategic thinking lies the same vulnerable, wondering consciousness that dwells in every human heart. The spiritual teacher recognizes that their role as wisdom bearer is a temporary assignment, not a permanent identity, and that the one who teaches and the one who learns are both expressions of the same infinite awareness exploring itself through apparent relationship. The mother sees that while her love for her children is real and eternal, her identity as mother is one note in a symphony too vast for any single role to contain. The artist understands that creativity flows through them rather than from them, that they are not the source of inspiration, but its temporary vessel, its willing collaborator in the endless dance of form and formlessness. This dissolution of identification with our roles happens gradually, like the slow change of seasons. There is no violence in it, no sudden stripping away that would leave us naked and defenseless in the world. Instead, there is a gentle loosening, a gradual expansion of our sense of self beyond the boundaries that once seemed so solid and necessary. We discover that we can play our roles more skillfully, not less, when we are not completely identified with them. The paradox emerges. As we become less attached to our personas, we become more effective in fulfilling them. The teacher teaches with greater authenticity when they remember they are not the source of wisdom, but its transparent conduit. The leader leads with greater skill when they understand that true authority comes not from ego, but from alignment, with the deeper intelligence that orchestrates all effective action. The lover loves more fully when they recognize that what they truly are is love itself, temporarily expressing through the form of personal relationship. We begin to see that all of human society is a kind of vast, improvisational theater, where consciousness plays countless roles simultaneously, sometimes forgetting and sometimes remembering that it is both the actor and the audience, the playwright and the stage. The seriousness with which we once approached our performances gives way to a quality of sacred play, where we can throw ourselves fully into our roles while never losing sight of our essential nature as the awareness within which all roles arise and pass away. This is not spiritual bypassing or dissociation from the relative world, but rather a more complete engagement with it. When we are no longer defending our personas against threat or trying to inflate them with achievement, we are free to respond to each moment with whatever qualities the situation truly requires. We become like skilled actors who can access any emotion, embody any character, serve any dramatic purpose while remaining centered in the unchanging awareness that observes all performances. The persona's final dance is also a dance of integration. Rather than discarding these aspects of ourselves, we learn to hold them lightly, to appreciate their beauty and function while recognizing their temporary nature. We develop what might be called conscious persona, the ability to consciously choose which aspects of ourselves to emphasize in different situations, not from calculation or manipulation, but from genuine responsiveness to what each moment is asking of us. In this phase, we begin to embody what the Zen tradition calls no mind, not the absence of thinking, but the presence of awareness that can think any thought, feel any emotion, play any role without becoming imprisoned by any of them. We discover the face we had before we were born, not as something we once possessed and lost, but as what we have always been underneath all our temporary costumes and performances. In the sacred chamber of surrender, where the ego's final defenses crumble like ancient walls touched by eternity, we arrive at the threshold of the great mystery. Here, in this liminal space between what was and what is yet to be born, we encounter the most profound paradox of human existence, the conjunctio oppositorum, the sacred marriage of opposites that Jung recognized as the very heart of transformation. Listen carefully to this truth that whispers from the depths of your being. In the moment of losing yourself completely, you find yourself utterly. This is not the philosophical riddle of minds seeking clever answers, but the lived reality of souls who have walked through the fire of their own undoing and emerged, phoenix-like, carrying the gold of their authentic being. The great alchemists knew this secret. They spoke in symbols and metaphors, understanding that the conjunction of opposites, the union of Sol and Luna, of sulfur and mercury, of king and queen, was not merely a chemical process, but a profound psychological truth. In their laboratories of the soul, they witnessed the same sacred marriage that now unfolds within you, the dance of polarities that creates not compromise, but transcendence. Watch how powerlessness becomes the doorway to true power. Not the power that dominates and conquers, but the power that flows from alignment with the deeper currents of existence. When you cease your desperate attempts to control the uncontrollable, when you release your white-knuckled grip on outcomes and surrender to the wisdom of the process itself, you discover a strength that is not your own, yet flows through you like a river through willing banks. This is the paradox of the warrior sage, who conquers by yielding, who leads by following, who speaks by listening to the silence within. In the ancient Chinese understanding, this is the marriage of yin and yang, not as static opposites locked in eternal conflict, but as dynamic forces whose very opposition creates the possibility of harmony. The darkness teaches the light its depth. The light teaches the darkness its transcendence. In your own journey of becoming, you have tasted both the nectar and the poison of existence. You have known the soaring heights of joy and the crushing depths of despair. You have experienced the intoxication of love and the devastation of loss, the ecstasy of connection and the agony of separation. These were not random accidents befalling an unfortunate soul, but necessary ingredients in the alchemical process of your individuation. The shadow you have wrestled with, that dark brother or sister who has challenged your every step toward the light, now reveals itself as your greatest teacher. In the depths of surrender, you begin to understand that your shadow was never your enemy, but your unrecognized completeness seeking integration. The very qualities you have rejected, suppressed, and projected onto others return now as gifts, as missing pieces of your wholeness that you can finally embrace without judgment. Feel how the tension of opposites creates the dynamic energy of life itself. Joy without sorrow becomes shallow pleasure. Sorrow without joy becomes sterile despair. But when they dance together in the ballroom of your awakened consciousness, they create something more beautiful than either could achieve alone. They create the music of authentic existence, the symphony of a life fully lived. This conjunction is not a one-time event but an ongoing process, a continuous dance of integration that deepens with each turn of the spiral. In every moment, you are called to hold the tension of paradox, to be simultaneously strong and vulnerable, wise and innocent, grounded and transcendent. This is not the burden of contradiction, but the gift of complexity, the richness that comes from embracing the full spectrum of human experience. The mystics of all traditions have pointed to this same truth through different languages and symbols. The Hindu understanding of Shiva and Shakti, the divine masculine and feminine principles whose eternal dance creates and destroys the universe. The Christian mystery of the crucifixion and resurrection, where death becomes the doorway to eternal life. The Buddhist recognition of emptiness and form as two faces of the same ultimate reality. In the depths of your surrender, you begin to taste this union directly. The boundaries between self and other, between inner and outer, between sacred and profane begin to dissolve, not into unconscious merger, but into conscious unity. You discover that the very search for wholeness was itself the movement of wholeness, seeking to know itself through the apparent fragmentation of experience. This is the birth of the transcendent function Jung spoke of, the emergence of a third way that includes and transcends the opposition of either-or thinking. No longer trapped in the prison of dualistic consciousness, you begin to navigate life from a place that honors both the practical and the mystical, both the human and the divine, both the personal and the transpersonal. As you rest in this space of sacred conjunction, allow yourself to feel the profound peace that comes from no longer needing to choose sides in the great cosmic dance. Light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, knowing and unknowing, all are welcome in the vast embrace of your awakening consciousness. You are the space in which all opposites meet, the still point around which the wheel of existence turns, the silent witness in whom all paradoxes find their resolution. This is your homecoming, not to a place, but to a way of being, not to a final destination, but to the eternal journey of becoming ever more fully yourself, while simultaneously dissolving into the mystery that you have always been. From the sacred ashes of dissolution, from the fertile ground of surrender, where opposites have found their union, something eternal stirs, not the birth of something new, but the recognition of what has always been, the self, that luminous essence that existed before your first breath and will remain after your final exhalation. This is the great revelation of individuation. You do not become who you are. You remember who you have always been. Listen to this truth that emerges from the depths of your being like a spring breaking through winter earth. Individuation is not the construction of a better ego, but the deconstruction of all that is not essentially you. It is the art of subtraction, the sacred practice of peeling away layer after layer of identification until only the irreducible core remains, pure, undiluted, authentically yours, yet paradoxically universal. The person you thought you were, that carefully constructed persona built from the accumulated shoulds and shouldn'ts of a lifetime, begins to reveal itself as nothing more than a costume worn by the eternal actor. The roles you have played, the masks you have worn, the stories you have told yourself about who you are and what you must become, all of these fade like morning mist before the rising sun of authentic being. This is not loss, but liberation. Each identification that falls away creates space for the self to breathe, to express, to manifest its unique signature in the world. You discover that you are not the accumulation of your experiences, but the awareness in which all experiences arise and dissolve. You are not the content of your consciousness, but consciousness itself, wearing the temporary garments of personality while remaining forever untouched by them. Jung understood this profound distinction between ego and self, between the small I that struggles and strives and the capital S that simply is. The ego, that necessary but ultimately limited sense of personal identity, has served its purpose in bringing you to this threshold. Like a cocoon that must split to release the butterfly, the ego's rigid boundaries dissolve to allow the self's authentic expression to emerge. Feel how this process unfolds not through effort, but through allowance, not through becoming, but through being. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, has encoded within you all the information necessary for your full flowering. Like a seed that contains the entire tree in potential, your essential nature carries the blueprint of your authentic expression. Individuation is simply the process of providing the right conditions for this inherent wholeness to manifest. The secrets that the universe whispers to those who have learned to listen are not complex teachings or esoteric knowledge, but the simple recognition of what is already present. They are the secrets hidden in plain sight, that you are already whole, already complete, already perfect in your essential nature. The search for meaning, for purpose, for fulfillment has been the self seeking to know itself through the apparent journey of the ego. This listening requires the surrender of the mind that thinks it knows, the heart that thinks it needs, the will that thinks it must control. It is the listening of your whole being, body, mind, and spirit aligned in receptive awareness, like a perfectly tuned instrument waiting for the cosmic symphony to play through it. In this state of open receptivity, you become a hollow reed through which the breath of the divine can flow. Watch how your life begins to reorganize itself around this new center of gravity. No longer driven by the ego's endless hunger for validation, achievement, and security, you move from a place of authentic response to what life presents. Your actions arise not from calculation or manipulation, but from the spontaneous expression of your essential nature, meeting the ever-changing circumstances of existence. This is the emergence of what Jung called the individuated person, not someone who has achieved some final state of perfection, but someone who has learned to live from their authentic center while remaining open to the ongoing process of becoming. You're no longer trying to be anyone other than who you are, no longer comparing yourself to some idealized version of yourself or others. The paradox reveals itself. In becoming fully yourself, you discover your fundamental interconnectedness with all life. Your uniqueness does not separate you, but connects you more deeply to the whole. Like a unique note in a cosmic symphony, your authentic expression enhances the beauty of the total composition while maintaining its own irreplaceable character. Feel the profound relief that comes with this recognition. The exhausting effort to maintain false selves, to live up to imagined expectations, to be anyone other than who you essentially are, all of this falls away like chains dropping from a prisoner who suddenly realizes the cell door was never locked. You are free to be yourself, and yourself is far more magnificent than any role you could have imagined playing. This is individuation unfolding, not as a destination reached, but as a way of being embraced, not as a problem solved, but as a mystery lived. Each day becomes an opportunity to express more fully the unique constellation of consciousness that you are, to offer your authentic gifts to a world that has been waiting for exactly what you have to bring. In this space of authentic being, you become a blessing to existence itself, a conscious participant in the universe's ongoing creation, a living testament to the truth that the greatest gift you can give the world is the fullest expression of who you truly are. With the veils of separation finally lifted, with the illusion of the isolated self dissolved into the greater truth of interconnected being, a magnificent revelation unfolds before your awakened perception. The cosmos reveals itself not as a collection of separate objects moving through empty space, but as an intricate choreography of consciousness, a divine dance in which every particle, every planet, every heartbeat participates in perfect synchronicity. You begin to perceive the sublime orchestration that has always been present, but was hidden by the fog of ego-centered vision. Every encounter that has shaped your journey, every moment of ecstasy and agony, every apparent accident and synchronicity, all reveal themselves as precisely choreographed movements in a cosmic ballet of becoming. What you once experienced as random chaos now shows itself to be exquisite order, operating according to laws far more subtle and profound than the linear causality of the rational mind. Feel how your perspective shifts from that of a separate observer watching life unfold from the outside to that of a conscious participant dancing from within the very heart of existence. You are no longer the audience member sitting in the theater of your life, critiquing the performance and wishing the script were different. You have stepped onto the stage and discovered that you are simultaneously the dancer, the dance, and the witnessing awareness in which the entire performance takes place. This is the revelation that the mystics have pointed toward through their paradoxical utterances. The universe is both the dancer and the dance, both the music and the silence from which the music emerges. In Hindu philosophy, this is the cosmic dance of Shiva Nataraja, who dances the world into existence and dissolution in an eternal rhythm that knows no beginning and no end. You discover that you too are this dancing divinity, expressing the infinite creativity of consciousness through your unique form. Watch how synchronicities begin to bloom around you, like flowers in an awakened garden. The meaningful coincidences that Jung recognized as glimpses into the underlying unity of existence become more frequent, more obvious, more impossible to dismiss as mere chance. The phone call that comes exactly when you need to hear from that person. The book that falls open to precisely the passage your soul is ready to receive. The stranger whose casual words carry the answer to your deepest question. All reveal themselves as movements in the grand choreography of awakening consciousness. You begin to understand that what you have been calling your personal journey of transformation is actually the universe's way of knowing itself more completely through your individual experience. Your struggles have been cosmic struggles. Your victories have been universal victories. Your growth has been existence itself, expanding into greater self-awareness. The boundary between your individuation and the cosmos's evolution dissolves into the recognition that they were never separate processes. This is the profound shift that occurs when consciousness recognizes its own fundamental nature. The forces that seemed so much greater than your individual will, the movements of destiny, the currents of collective transformation, the archetypal energies that shape human experience, reveal themselves not as external powers ruling over you, but as aspects of your own deepest being operating at levels beyond ordinary awareness. Feel the extraordinary intimacy of this revelation. You are not a small fragment of consciousness struggling to survive in an indifferent universe, but a unique expression of the universe's infinite creativity, a specialized organ through which the cosmos experiences and knows itself. Your joys become the universe celebrating its own beauty. Your sorrows become existence grieving its own temporary separations. Your love becomes the cosmic force that draws all things back into unity. This recognition transforms your relationship to everything. The challenges that once seemed like obstacles to your happiness reveal themselves as invitations to greater depth, greater wisdom, greater compassion. The people who have played difficult roles in your story show themselves to be perfect teachers, offering exactly the lessons your soul needed to mature into its fullest expression. Even your mistakes and failures begin to shimmer with hidden purpose, showing how they contributed to the precise unfolding of your awakening. In this space of cosmic participation, you move with a different quality of presence. Your actions arise not from personal agenda, but from spontaneous response to the deeper currents of existence. You become like a master dancer who has practiced the steps so thoroughly that technique dissolves into pure expression, allowing the music itself to move through your being and manifest as perfect, effortless form. The great spiritual traditions have all pointed to this ultimate recognition through their various languages and symbols. In Taoism, it is the state of wu-wei, of action that is no action, of moving in perfect harmony with the Tao. In Buddhism, it is the recognition of interdependence, the understanding that no phenomenon exists separately from the vast web of conditions that gives rise to and sustains all experience. In the mystical traditions of the West, it is the unio mystica, the sacred marriage between the individual soul and the divine ground of being. As you rest in this awareness of cosmic participation, allow yourself to marvel at the sheer elegance of existence. Every breath you take is the universe breathing through you. Every thought that arises is consciousness exploring its own infinite potential. Every act of love is the cosmos expressing its fundamental nature of unity. You have become a conscious collaborator in the grand work of creation, dancing your unique steps while moving in perfect harmony with the eternal rhythm that pulses at the heart of all existence. Description: what the universe reveals when you finally let go. Carl Jung: what if the collapse of your identity isn't a crisis, but a cosmic invitation? In this meditative journey into the soul, we explore what Carl Jung called the sacred wound, the moment life dismantles the fortress of ego we spent a lifetime building. Through rich metaphor and psychological depth, this video uncovers the secret dialogue between the self and the universe, the silent, soul-altering revelations that only emerge when we dare to surrender control. Jung taught that individuation doesn't mean becoming more of who the ego thinks you are, but dissolving the illusion of permanence altogether. the ego's resistance, the persona's unraveling, the sacred pain of letting go, these are not failures. They are stages of psychological alchemy, Nigredo, albedo, and ultimately, the union of opposites. As the constructed self dissolves, what remains is not emptiness, but presence, not despair, but meaning beyond form. This is the moment the unconscious reveals its guidance. This is when the cosmos whispers its truest truths, that wholeness lies not in grasping, but in release. If you've experienced a moment where life stripped you bare, only to leave you more awake, share your story in the comments. Your unraveling may be someone else's roadmap. Carl Jung, Murphy Shadow Work, Individuation, Sacred Wound, Jungian Psychology, Ego Dissolution, Psychological Alchemy, Letting Go, Nigredo, Persona Collapse,